and gentlemen. North Carolina people continuing this evening with the series that we've had of introducing you to very effective and important members of the North Carolina legislature. Dale Folwell is one of those. 4 terms now, representing the 74th District, which is the Winston-Salem area. He's a graduate of the University at Greensboro, has advanced degree work, and is a professional in the field of finance. We're very glad that he could sit down with us at this occasion and talk for a few seconds, and we will do so and bring him before you in just those few seconds.
Funding for North Carolina people is provided in part by Wells Fargo. When you want a bank with greater accessibility, Wells Fargo is with you, giving you the tools to help you stay connected. Wells Fargo, together we'll go far. And through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC TV.
It's good to have you join me on North Carolina People, Dale. And how'd you get interested in politics? What got you started in all this?
Well, my interest in politics really came from my interest in motorcycling. I like fixing things, and as your viewers know, there's lots that needs to be fixed in the state and national government. And so I've took the skills that I developed as a mechanic and applied those to the investment business, and took those same skills and applied those to the world of governing.
Well, you're very much a respected member of this legislative process, and thank you for being willing to take on this public service. You're known as one that always points to what you call the great invisibles out here in our culture.
Sure.
What do we mean by that?
Well, the invisibles are the things that are going to affect the North Carolina budget and North Carolinians over the next 2 decades. The first invisible is the broken Employment Security Commission, the unemployment system. In the last 26 months, we have accumulated $2.7 billion worth of additional debt that we owe to the federal government. As we sit here this morning, the largest employer in 18 counties of North Carolina is the unemployment check. And in some months, we have borrowed as much as $120 million to pay those claims. So we have to find an answer to that, because that burden is going to be on the people and the small and large businesses of North Carolina if we don't find an answer. The second was the workers' compensation system, which is actually one of the big regulatory reforms that we did this year. I got this idea by listening to a small business person in Mount Airy who told me that they could move their plant a few miles up the road and save enough money just on workers' comp premium to hire another person. Then I started hearing from the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in Fayetteville, who has to manufacture several thousand tires per day, every day in Fayetteville, to pay the workers' comp premium of that one plant. And then I started thinking about who the largest employer in North Carolina is. It's the state.
That's right.
The counties, the school districts, and the cities. This is a huge issue for the states. And the reason, just like the unemployment security situation, is that it was broken. These are the regulatory laws of the border states of North Carolina. These are the workers' comp laws of Virginia, the workers' comp laws of South Carolina, the workers' comp laws of Tennessee, and these were ours.
Now, why is there so much legislation?
Well, one reason is that all this regulation dealing with workers' comp was really at the end not good for the worker, the employer, the employee, or the system itself. So what we did is we introduced a bill called Protect and Put North Carolina Back to Work. The first goal of this system is for people not to get injured in North Carolina. That should be the first goal, not how to compensate them, but to prevent them from being injured to start with. But the put back to work means that if they are injured, getting them the medical attention they need as quickly as possible, determine what their needs are, and finding suitable employment for them to get them back to work in a shorter period of time than would have normally been available. And more importantly, at the very back of that is that we do have people who are tragically injured. But and those people deserve everything and then some. But the way it was designed and what this book shows is that in North Carolina, if you died on the job, you would get 400 weeks of benefit. If you had a temporary disability, your benefit was for the rest of your life. That was completely backwards. And more importantly, this is an economic development item, because we know that the states that border us have a more simpler, better workers' comp system, and that was putting us at a competitive disadvantage.
What do you do then when you make these points? Are you holding hearings about this to revamp the law? Or how are we going to deal with the problem that you raised?
Well, we've dealt with that problem.
Yeah.
We introduced a bill. It ended up passing 100 to 7.
Yeah.
Overwhelming support. It passed in the Senate unanimously, because what I did is I brought the sides together, starting with the governor's office, the AFL-CIO, the trial attorneys, the North Carolina Chamber, the home builders, all the groups that are impacted by this. I brought them to the table, because what we find is that as we go up the ladder of trying to do real reform in North Carolina, what we find is that there's a lot of things that people agree on. And so what I tried to do is find out what we agreed on, then we could argue about the rest. You know, when you look at what's going on in the national media right now, people talk about we need to get along. I don't think the public really cares that we get along. What the public wants is their problems fixed. They don't care how you do it, they just want their problems fixed.
Pay attention to me.
Yeah. The other two issues, which are even more magnificent, are the unfunded health care liability. It's funny that Governor Christie goes all over the country and talking about what shape New Jersey's in. But as a percentage, North Carolina's in worse shape than he is in terms of the unfunded health care liability. We have a $37 billion unfunded health care liability for our active and retired state employees. We're doing all kinds of fixes to bend the curve, but that is going to consume between $3 and $4 billion out of our budget for the next 19 years to fix that. And then the fourth one, of course, is the state pension plan.
Is that in a healthy posture, in your view?
Our state pension plan is approximately 92% funded. It's one of the best funded plans in the state. But there's some things inside that plan that are pushing down on the left wing and pushing up on the right wing. And it's always flown very level over the years. But for example, we assume that that plan is going to earn 7.25% rate of return every year. It really hasn't done that for a very long period of time. So anytime that you assume something's going to grow at a certain rate and it doesn't, then obviously somewhere down the road it's going to have issues too.
It's like debating Social Security and these other questions. That when the activation age, for example, is one that gets debated.
Sure.
Are there factors like these in this debate?
Well, absolutely. You know, we have people in North Carolina who are going to be retired for longer than they worked.
Yeah.
This plan, when you first became a participant in this plan, the average life expectancy was dramatically different than it is now. It was never designed to compensate people who were going to be retired for longer than they worked. You can come and work for the state at the age of 21, get full retirement at the age of 51, free lifetime health care basically. And these systems, these invisible things, is what's going to really drive the agenda for the next 2 decades in North Carolina.
Then the question is, looking at when retirement should vest, is that not one of the issues that's out here? What age that should take? And that's true of almost every one of these beneficiary type of programs.
Every year that I've been in the General Assembly, 6 of those 7 years I was in the minority party, I've tried to introduce and pass some kind of reform bill for health care and the state pension plan. 4 years ago, I changed the vesting period for the health plan from 5 years and 1 day to 20 years. We have actuarial reports that show that that one small change has already taken about $700 million off of our long-term liability.
It's not small, Dale.
It's not small, but it's
That's right.
And it's going to be growing from there. And the reason is that your viewers may not have woken up thinking about this morning, But for 57 miles, we have as much border with other states as California does. So everything we do, we need to make sure it's in line with what our border states are doing, because individuals will make micro decisions to their benefit, but maybe to the macro detriment of the system. So when we had a 5-year vesting period, what occurred is that people would retire with full pensions from other states, dip into North Carolina, finding a job doing anything they could do for the state, work 5 years in one day, get the pension from the state they retired from, get free lifetime health care from the citizens of North Carolina. That's what's bankrupting, and that's what bankrupted this state. But I've got that changed, and I changed the vesting period for the pension plan this year.
Now, speaking in an accumulating sense, what is the financial burden then with these, what you call great invisibles? What are we talking about here, money?
Well, $36 billion is the long-term liability associated with the health plan. $2.6 billion is the liability associated with the unemployment situation that we have. I believe, if my numbers are correct, every 0.5% that the pension plan is underfunded, that's another $1 billion. This adds up to over 50 or 60 billion dollars. But more importantly, we have to start bending the curve, or those liabilities are going to get even larger as we go forward.
So the problem now is really revenue, isn't it? And readjustment.
The problem now is that we have a tax base that's getting narrower and deeper. We have more and more people not paying taxes. We have more and more buildings that don't pay taxes. So the needs of the state are growing, but the tax base is shrinking. And what happens is, when a tax base gets narrower and deeper, the money that's in your pocket, it goes where it's invited and it stays where it's welcomed. And businesses will take their jobs and take their money and take their capital, and they'll go somewhere else. We have to have major reforms on how we operate our state government. And unfortunately for the viewer, we've led them to believe, politicians have led them to believe, that this is like a piece of country ham. That all we have to do is take a sharp knife and cut the fat around the edge, and all of our lives are going to be back to normal. You know, what I'm talking about is like marbleized meat.
Yeah.
You know, the fat is deep within the agencies and the meat of the state of North Carolina, and those are the kinds of things that we have to concentrate on.
What you just said, I brought this with me because I got it yesterday, and I never really paid any attention to it before. But the exemptions and the loopholes in the tax structure you were just referring to now, in this report that I just got, at $9 billion.
That's correct. That's correct.
This state can't afford that.
Well,
what can we do about a thing like that?
Well, what I have done about it is I've listened, and I've tried to act and tried to fix those situations. One thing that will shock you deep into that report is the fact that we have private schools, and many, not all, and all the nonprofits of North Carolina get all of their sales tax refunded, but the school systems of North Carolina do not. Every public school system in North Carolina, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, Mecklenburg, Wake County, every major school system in North Carolina, when it pays its sales tax, it does not get it refunded, but every other entity does.
But
that's a nonprofit.
I leafed through here, and some of these things, the age is old.
Correct.
They've been here with us for a long time. When are we going to sit down and really take a hard look and do something about this? Because this is, you know, this has gone from 6 to 9 billion in the last 4 years.
Sure. These are one of the invisible things.
Yeah, it surely is.
You know, your viewers did not wake up this morning thinking about workers' comp or state health plan, but they do wake up in the morning thinking about public education, public roads, public safety. It's not a conservative or even a Republican that's going to be their competitor. It's the arithmetic.
No, this is something that's accumulated over both administrations.
Right.
And It just seems to me, I've been pretty close watching this, but I've never really been hit with the impact of something until I picked this thing up, and I said to myself, somebody's got to take the laboring oar here pretty soon.
And it's important to realize that when you try to reform state government, it's going to be messy, and people are not going to like what they read in the paper about. You know, we didn't reform the workers' comp system. It wasn't kumbaya at all during the process. It was very volatile. But as I said earlier, people just want their problems fixed.
Yeah.
They don't care how much blood, sweat, and tears that I have to expend to do it.
That's right. And also they want to know, and I don't think they know about this.
Sure.
The public really has no idea that the volume of this is as great as it is, and it's apparently going to grow. Dale, the next session will be even more. And so, well, this whole business of the revenue base, my familiarity, of course, is with the university, and the size and magnitude of that last cut, $400 million. I asked two of the chancellors, I want to know what happened. And I just got Chapel Hill's figures where they had 352 positions from the Personnel Act category, but 80 faculty and research people, all those have been lost. Now, you just can't maintain quality when you keep doing things like that. And the reason that I argue so about tuition is that's not the way to offset this.
Right.
The fact that other states do this and so, that's not North Carolina. North Carolina has a constitution that said certain things, and you do certain things like it. Do you see any bend in the road now? Are we going to begin to right all of this?
Well, the only thing that's going to fix these problems is to get people back to work in North Carolina.
Right.
So many of these things start to be self-correcting if people come back to work. But the years of spray and pray, as I call it, spraying money on problems and crossing our fingers and pray that they work, those days are over. People are going to be demanding that we get more out of every state dollar that we possibly can. But at the end of the day, and as I learned at UNCG, it really just becomes one simple matter. If people don't have jobs, they're not paying taxes. And if people, businesses or individuals are not paying taxes, there's not the government. And if the government doesn't exist, you know, institutions, whether it's higher ed or lower ed, aren't able to get the money they need. So our concentration has to be on getting people back to work. And what I'm afraid of, the other two invisibles, which I haven't talked about, was that the joy of achievement in North Carolina has been replaced by the sense of entitlement. We have to move that pendulum back toward the joy of achievement. We have to put government in a position where it creates liberty and opportunity to liberate people, to let them, as you said earlier, to run wild with their creativity and do what God gave them the ability to do better than anyone else. We have to get the pendulum back toward the joy of achievement to correct any of these problems.
You know, you raised this question in my mind, and I don't ask it argumentatively. I just want to understand. Last time, we had the possibility of extending that 1-cent sales tax. That was $800 million.
It was.
And it was not extended. And that means these 350 people had to go. Is there a public policy behind that decision like that? What were we trying to achieve by not maintaining that revenue base?
Well, the public policy for me, because I voted for it and obviously voted on it, was the fact that the sales tax is one of the most regressive taxes that exist. And we all know that during recessions that it's the poor that get hit the first and the worst in North Carolina. But the second thing is that's what we told people that we would do. My English professor, Jim Clark, will be proud of the fact that I know the difference between a verb and a noun. The reason we got into all of these situations is that conservatives haven't conserved, liberals haven't liberated, leaders haven't led, and representatives haven't represented. Because what they do is they go home during election time and they put one thing on their job application, and then when they come to Raleigh or Washington, they do something completely different. The sales tax, specifically to your question, is something that we, the General Assembly, approved 2 years ago. I voted against it then, and said it would be a sunset. All of your viewers know the definition of a sunset. It's something that goes away. The governor last year was on record of saying, "Why do you think the sales tax is going to sunset?" And she said, "Because I said so, and I'm the governor." So what we did is we sunset the sales tax, which is exactly what we told people we would do. And I think our responsibility is to apply for these jobs the exact same way that we're going to govern. In too many instances, people go out and politic and say one thing, and then when they start governing, they do something different.
You now sit at a very important level of government. What do you see out there in the future then, Dale, looking to North Carolina and the state? What is your hope? What do you hope we'll do?
What I hope we will do is that whatever political party we're a member of, or whatever title, conservative or liberal, that we most identify with, that people will embrace who they are. You know, we're no better, elected officials are no better than anyone else in this state. But we are a means to an end of things they do care about, like public education, crime and public safety, or roads and jobs. So my hope is that people would continue to embrace who they are. If a liberal has a better way of fixing something, then they need to step forward with that idea. If a conservative has a better way, they need to step forward. But the #1 natural resource of North Carolina is brains, and we're wasting a lot of them in this state right now.
Well, does that mean then that you really feel we've got to get back to a better job of education, first grade through the graduate school, to get that base of people ready to carry us into the future?
Sure. I've attempted to do that. 6 years ago, I changed the birthday cutoff date, which makes sure that we no longer have 4, 5, and 6-year-olds in every kindergarten classroom. It was a disaster for 29 years. Now there's only 5 and 6-year-olds. Now I'm working on the effect of student mobility. In the urban school districts, we have some elementary schools that have a 30% inventory turn between the month of August and May. Now, we all are familiar with that concept with military families and Methodist minister families, but when you have kids changing schools 1 and 2 times entry year, there's nothing that we can do in the middle school or the high school that's going to make them successful. So I'm concentrating on student mobility. But if we all focus on the fact that it's the joy of achievement, and not to look at anyone based on their lot in life and tell them that based on where you are is going to determine where you end up. If we can just reseed that idea with people of North Carolina, I think the bigotry of low expectations will go away. And that's the most important invisible thing that we deal with every day.
You feel good about the future?
I feel good about the future in the sense that any time that you can bring something to light, like the report that you have on your desk or these other invisible things in North Carolina, I feel very strongly and positive about the future. But it's going to require major reform, and it's not going to be the big thing. It's always going to be the little things that's going to determine whether we're going to be successful. But it's very important that we cannot get out of lockstep with states that border us. We need to make sure that our systems, whether it's the Medicare eligibility system or the unemployment eligibility system or getting into the state health plan, we need to make sure that these systems are not designed to reward the opposite behavior that we desire.
You're a student of government, obviously. You work hard at it. And do you see the spirit of the people really supporting now what government does? I noticed that last survey showed that, well, the Congress of the United States has an 8% rating. You all did a lot better, but it's still not where it ought to be. This business of the public and you,
right?
You work at that.
I think people are really overwhelmed about the problems facing North Carolina. And I think it's the elected officials' responsibility every day to take political risk, to take policy risk, to fix and listen. If we will do take advantage of what God gave us, which is 2 ears and 1 mouth, we can listen to the people of North Carolina. The small business folks, the large companies, the individuals, they can give us great ideas that we can operate on. And that's what our responsibility should be.
Thank you, Dale Folwell. It's been too brief. I've enjoyed sitting here talking with you, and thank you for your public service. And friends, I know you've enjoyed meeting this leader of our legislative process, and thank you again for coming over. And good night, and I'll see you next week.